The night was moonless, the kind of darkness that seemed to swallow the world whole. Clara had been driving for hours, the monotonous hum of her car's engine the only companion on the desolate highway. She'd been warned about taking the old Route 66 stretch this late, but she was eager to cut time off her trip back home. The GPS had assured her it was the fastest way, a shortcut through nowhere. The road ahead was eerily quiet, lined by skeletal trees whose twisted branches clawed at the starless sky. The only light came from her headlights, piercing through the thick fog that had started to roll in. As the minutes ticked by, Clara couldn't shake the creeping unease settling in her chest. She turned on the radio, hoping to drown out the silence, but all she got was static. With a sigh, she switched it off, the static almost more unsettling than the quiet. Her phone's signal had vanished miles ago, leaving her completely isolated. Just as she was beginning to consider turning back, a figure appeared in her peripheral vision. A man standing on the side of the road, waving frantically. Clara slammed on the brakes, her heart leaping into her throat. The car screeched to a stop a few feet past him. She hesitated, her fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly. The man was disheveled, his clothes torn and dirty, and his face pale as if he'd been running for miles. Against her better judgment, she rolled down the window slightly. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. The man stumbled closer, his eyes wide with terror. "Please, you have to help me. Something's out here," he said, his voice cracking. Clara's stomach knotted. "What do you mean? What's out here?" Before he could answer, a low, guttural growl echoed from the woods. The man's head snapped toward the sound, and his face contorted in fear. "Please, let me in. It's coming!" Every instinct screamed at Clara to drive away, but something in his eyes, a raw, primal fear, made her unlock the passenger door. The man scrambled inside, slamming the door shut just as another growl echoed, this time closer. "Go! Drive!" he yelled. Clara didn't need to be told twice. She floored the gas pedal, the tires squealing as the car surged forward. In the rearview mirror, she caught a glimpse of something emerging from the trees, a hulking, shadowy figure with glowing red eyes. It moved unnaturally fast, keeping pace with the car for several agonizing seconds before vanishing into the fog. "What the hell was that?" Clara demanded, her knuckles white as she gripped the wheel. The man shook his head, his chest heaving. "I don't know. I was camping out here with some friends when we heard it. It got them. I barely escaped." Clara's heart pounded as she glanced at the man. His hands were trembling, his eyes darting to the windows as if expecting the creature to reappear. She didn't know whether to believe him, but the fear in his voice was undeniable. The road stretched on, each mile feeling longer than the last. The fog thickened, and Clara struggled to see more than a few feet ahead. The man's breathing had slowed, but he kept glancing over his shoulder, his paranoia infectious. "Do you think it's still following us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the darkness outside. Then the car's headlights flickered. No, Clara muttered, her pulse quickening. The engine sputtered and the car began to slow. "What's happening?" the man asked, panic rising in his voice. "I don't know," Clara replied, frantically pressing the gas pedal. The car coasted to a stop, the headlights dying completely, plunging them into darkness. The silence was deafening, broken only by their ragged breathing. Clara fumbled for her phone, but it was useless without a signal. The man's head whipped toward the back window, his face pale. "It's here," he whispered. Clara turned slowly, her heart hammering in her chest. At first, she saw nothing but the inky blackness. Then, two glowing red eyes appeared, hovering just outside the car. They were joined by a massive, shadowy form, its shape barely discernible but undeniably menacing. The creature let out a guttural snarl, the sound vibrating through the car. Clara's hand darted to the ignition, twisting the key desperately. The engine sputtered but didn't start. Come on, she pleaded. The creature slammed a massive hand against the car, the impact rocking the vehicle. Clara screamed, and the man grabbed her arm. "We have to run," he yelled. "Are you insane?" she shot back. "It'll rip through this car like paper. We have a chance if we get to the trees." Before she could argue, the passenger door flew open. The man bolted, disappearing into the fog. Clara froze, torn between staying in the relative safety of the car and following him. The creature's eyes bore into her, and she made her decision. She threw open her door and ran, the cold night air biting at her skin. The fog was disorienting, and every snapping twig or rustling leaf sent her heart racing. She could hear the creature behind her, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground. Ahead, she saw a faint light flickering through the trees. She sprinted toward it, her legs burning with effort. As she got closer, she realized it was a cabin, its windows glowing warmly. She burst through the door, slamming it shut behind her. Inside, the man was huddled in a corner, clutching a knife. The cabin was small and sparse, but it felt like a sanctuary compared to the darkness outside. "Do you think it can get in?" Clara asked, her voice shaking. The man didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the door. A heavy thud made them both jump. The creature was outside, testing the walls of the cabin. Clara backed away, her breath coming in short gasps. The thudding stopped, and for a moment, there was silence. Then a voice came, low and guttural, but unmistakably human. "Clara!" Her blood ran cold. "How does it know my name?" The man's eyes widened. "Don't listen to it. It'll try to trick you." The voice came again, closer this time. "Clara, let me in." The door rattled and the wood began to splinter. Clara's mind raced, searching for a way out. The man stood, gripping his knife tightly. "If it gets in, we fight." Before she could respond, the door exploded inward, and the creature stepped inside. It was larger than she'd imagined, its twisted form barely fitting through the doorway. The man charged, screaming as he plunged the knife into its chest. The creature roared, swatting him aside like a rag doll. Clara grabbed a broken piece of wood from the shattered door, her survival instincts kicking in. As the creature turned toward her, she lunged, driving the makeshift weapon into its glowing red eye. It let out a deafening screech, thrashing wildly. She took the opportunity to grab the man, dragging him out of the cabin as the creature writhed in pain. They ran without looking back, the sounds of the creature's screams fading into the distance. Eventually, they reached the road, and to Clara's relief, a pair of headlights appeared in the distance. She waved frantically, and the car stopped, the driver's concerned face peering out. "Please help us," Clara begged. The driver nodded, ushering them into the car. As they drove away, Clara looked back one last time. The fog had lifted slightly,